up on that red pyramid rock. And then I think Cameron and I just decided that the real run was to just go through the hole. And that's what we did for most of the rest of my career. And it would just stand that thing up like that. And on you'd go. And holler and shout, have a great time. Till one time mine just stood up and fell sideways out. And then I started cheating it again, or trying to. Actually, then I went to Dory's. And, something that I knew I could get right side up again. But when I first started with Dory's, we'd usually run this on a pretty high water level, and we'd do what we call the high right kamikaze run, where you'd come yipping in with an empty boat down the right shore in amongst quite a few rocks, and then at a certain point you'd spin it and drop through a slot barely wide enough to get a boat through. There's a huge pour over to your left at that point. We called it Milt Stop and Eat because one of our boatmen nicknamed Milt had stopped and eaten there a couple times, wrecked a few boats. And you made that.
Okay, let's go right ahead.
And then Martin describes the highway. We finally found the highway, and you go to the left of Milt Stop and Eat. You come in rowing hard for the right to get in that perfect spot, and then at some point you go, I must be there. And you turn and face it, sailing down there, just to the left of Milt Stop and Eat, just to the right of the old hole. If you turn to face it, it'd flip you. And sail on down through the rock island, and it was great. And by the end of '82, we'd finally gotten to the point where we felt good enough about it. We were taking a lot of our people through, and had finally figured Crystal out. And then, of course, in '83, it was changed dramatically. As it came up, it was pretty much the same thing. You could miss the hole and zing on down, and it was okay. And at 90 or whatever the peak was when Brian and Lester and I were here, it was still, if you were aggressively cheating over to the right, you could make it through. I don't think anybody that really tried to cheat at that high level had much trouble. But then it went down, and I remember being at the warehouse with Martin and Regan, and we heard that the water had gone down and Crystal was just, for all practical purposes, unrunnable. So we came out in Martin's plane and went round and round and round, and all you could see was a lateral and some big holes down on the center and the left. I thought, well, you just row through the lateral. It's simple. And so we went back and launched and came down and found that you really couldn't punch through it very effectively in a rowboat. The motorboats were making it through. But we would row up into the lateral, which I believe formed right about off these biggest pink rocks and ended with that first crashing hole. That was what I think was the top lateral. That next big hole was humongous. We called that the New Wave. And then the old hole, which is down there, was still huge with that much water. And that was probably 50,000 or so. And we try to break this first lateral, but if you look closely, it was moving sideways in addition to falling down.
Oh, wow.
And it was almost impossible in a rowboat to break through it with any predictability. You know, most of us still made it, but a frighteningly high percentage, maybe, what would you say, 25% of us at least, went for the big ride and often flipped in the process. Because if you didn't flip in that feeder, I flipped there the only time I went over. Then you'd go into the New Wave and maybe flip there, and if you didn't flip there, then you'd go into the old hole, which in my recollection was really about the biggest thing at 40 or 50,000 still, although they were, you know, three just giants. And if you came out of that, you still had to deal with the island, and down there at the bottom there's a huge rock that even at 40,000 was still causing a lot of damage if you hit it, and it's magnetic. It actually attracts boats. And so we, for several years, from 83 on through 86, we would team up, two boatmen, and it was this incredible bonding experience where the two of you would get in one of the boats, and you'd go out there and you'd do your damnedest, and you never knew what was going to happen. But one of you'd be up in the front high-siding and just, you know, boom, onto that gunnel, and over she'd go. Get on the bottom. or maybe you'd make it through, and then you'd try and get it in down there, and you'd hike back up, and the other guy got to row. And you'd do it again, and occasionally there'd be a third boat that maybe a baggage boatman or maybe one of the other boatmen just didn't want to do it or got beat up in the first run. A couple times you'd have to do 3 boats through there, and it was, and you knew that, I mean, it was really scary. You thought maybe, just maybe, you'd be next to an upside down boat in the Rock Island, and that'd be it. So it was really pretty hyper, you know. We'd put helmets on, and Kenton came up with a system of tying those yellow tubes up on the deck, so if the boat went over, it'd be easier to get it up, or it might right itself.
Those really worked too. Nobody flipped those.
We never actually product tested it, which is amazing. It worked great on the lake. And then after '86, it came down below 30,000, and this lateral has been penetrable, pretty much predictably penetrable ever since. And then at these lower water levels, the left run has opened up as well. That's what I remember.